Hi, I'm Katie Mullen. I'm the founder of MMS Consulting. The reason I founded MMS is because I discovered early on in my sales career that cold calling is scary, and most people don't want to do it. Even people who've been around a long time, seasoned sales reps, really aren't excited to pick up the phone and call someone that they've never talked to before. There are exceptions, of course, but when a salesperson sits down to plan their day, generally they will prioritize everything over making those calls, even expense reports. This means that weeks and weeks go by when salespeople prioritize everything they possibly can over making those crucial calls. And what does this mean to your management team? This means that their funnel is going dry. It means they are missing huge opportunities because they just weren't at the right time and place when the customer finally decided to start looking at replacing that old equipment. If you're wondering, and this really applies to your sales team, consider this. There's a great book called The Psychology of Sales Call Reluctance, written by two psychologists, Shannon Goodson and George Dedley. And their research shows that as many as 80% of salespeople who fail within the first year do so because they're not cold calling or not cold calling enough. So early on in my sales career, I realized that if I could get comfortable with making those scary calls, I could really differentiate myself. So I became the queen of cold calling. I made it my mission to learn everything I possibly could. I read every book. I listened to all the experts. I took every training I could find. And then I went out and put that into practice. And I took careful notes of what worked and what didn't work. And I became very successful. And soon I was being asked by my management team to help train all new hires to try to duplicate what I was doing. But I wanted to go further. I wanted to really understand the customer and get inside their head. I wanted to understand what we as salespeople do that is annoying to customers and what we could do better from their perspective. So I founded MMS Consulting and I decided to start a research study. And over a 3-year period, I asked hundreds of customers in over 20 states a standard list of questions. Questions like, how many cold calls do you get a week? What are your pet peeves? What advice would you give to a salesperson? How often do you actually return a voicemail? Those are just examples of a few of the questions I asked. And more recently, since the world has completely changed in the last 6 months, I decided to continue my research and went out and started asking different questions like, what has changed for you with new quarantine rules? What are your Zoom preferences? Are you even still talking to salespeople about buying anything in this pandemic world we're living in? And I didn't just ask questions about cold calling, but about the whole sales process. From this research, I compiled a huge database of information about how customers want to be treated. And I used this combined with my own research and my own best practices from my almost 20 years in sales in multiple industries, ranging from medical devices to reinsurance to online media, even fundraising. And I developed a curriculum that can teach your salespeople not only how to call, but motivate them to want to pick up the phone. They will be comfortable, they will be confident, they will understand the customer, and they will start being able to build the trust that they need to make that sale. Now, the question you might be asking yourself is, well, how are we going to do this? This all sounds great, but we can't do conferences anymore. We can't do sales trainings the way we used to. We're living in a virtual world now, and I'm lucky enough to have access to this fabulous studio where I can offer you 3 choices of courses, and I can do them all virtually. The first option is a 1-hour keynote with Q&A where I go through all the research I have gathered, and I do it in an interactive way with your team. Well, they will be able to participate in polls and see how well they know their customers. They'll compare what they think the customer is thinking to the reality. And then we'll use polls and interactive word clouds to really illustrate this message and drive it home to your teams. Before the keynote, I will spend some time with your management team learning more about your product so I can customize my presentation. And when we talk in terms of customers and call points, it will really make sense to your team. The second option I have is a 3-hour training where I still give my 1-hour-long interactive keynote about the customer research because that really is the cornerstone of my strategic program. But then I will start adding concrete, actionable advice about being more strategic when you call so that your team will feel comfortable picking up the phone and making those hard calls. We'll talk about finding the right time of day to call, the right day of the week to call, because there actually are good times of day and good days of the week. And we use research to back up that advice. We'll also get into what to say and what not to say. We'll have good call scripts and bad call scripts so they can really see examples. Then we'll cover business writing, including subject lines and how to differentiate yourself by avoiding the right subject lines and how to write emails that really speak to the customer. And we'll get into how to create an effective calling campaign using both emails and calling. And lastly, we will cover the value proposition. I will spend some time with your team before the training, understanding your product so we can really figure out how to communicate your value proposition to the customer when they're making those calls. My final offering is a 6-hour course covering everything we covered in the first 3 hours, but a couple of additional things like LinkedIn. I can give each member of your team a detailed report about the effectiveness of their current profile and their picture, and teach them how to tweak it so that the customer starts to really trust them from the moment they see their online profile. I will move past the cold call and get into an in-depth training about the customer meeting and teach your team how to effectively handle presentations, both in person and in Zoom. We'll go even deeper to talk about customer pet peeves and advice during the calls and during the whole sales process. We will wrap up with going over a comprehensive prospecting strategy that starts with the cold calling, incorporates LinkedIn, Zoom, emailing, the customer meeting, and the follow-ups. No matter which training you choose, your team is going to walk away energized and ready to get out there and start making those calls. And I have a great technology team here to make sure that the training is smooth even in this virtual world. So if you're interested in learning more, you can reach out to me or to my agent Kelly for more information. Thank you.